Thank you both for your time. We appreciate it. It's good to see you both together. I know that a friendship kind of bloomed out of January 6th and some things you experienced together. But Congresswoman Cheney, I have to believe you are closer in policy to Ted Cruz than you are to the congressman here. So why are you campaigning against Ted Cruz?
You know, I feel that this race is such an important one. I have not endorsed in any other Senate race this time around. But I served with Colin. I know him. I know what kind of a congressman he's been. I watched him. As you said, we were on opposite sides of issues and opposite sides of the aisle. Not every issue on opposite sides, but I also know Ted Cruz. You know, I've known him for over 20 years. And I know that he will say anything if it serves his own political purpose. And the nation is at a moment where we need public servants who are men and women of goodwill, who are men and women who will do the right thing. We need serious people in office, and the choice for the people of Texas is just a very clear one. And you know, I think as we begin to look beyond the kind of politics that we have seen, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, I think it's really important that we have serious people in office. And so when there's a candidate who is as competent and somebody the kind of character as Colin, I think it's very important that we support them.
Some Republicans might say you are abandoning conservative values by endorsing Congressman Colin Allred and Vice President Kamala Harris. What would you say to them?
I'd say, look, in my view, the most conservative value of all is being faithful to the Constitution and doing your duty to uphold the Constitution. And that has to come above party. It has to come above partisanship. I was thinking as I came here, you know, I have a picture that I keep in my office. And it's of my dad and Brent Scowcroft, who is the National Security Advisor, and President Bush, 41. And it's, you know, when they were sitting around the Resolute desk when President Bush, 41, was in office. And I keep it there because they're serious people, and they were engaged in serious and important policy discussions and debates. And, you know, when I watch the kinds of things that we saw Ted Cruz do after the 2020 election in particular, his willingness to do whatever Donald Trump wanted him to do, including proposing this completely unconstitutional plan that would have resulted in throwing out electoral votes, throwing out the votes of millions of Americans, something that, as I said, was unconstitutional. And Ted Cruz was one of the leaders of that in the Senate. It's just dangerous. These jobs really matter. And in this race, I want to do everything I can to help ensure that the people of Texas elect Colin Allred.
You could be campaigning anywhere across the country. So what is it in this race that you see? Why come to Texas? Do you see something about this race that makes you think that your participation in it can make a difference?
Look, I think that what we all have seen, and I hope really it becomes a civics lesson for the country, sort of as we look at the period of time, especially since the last election, how much these jobs matter and how much people really have to understand when you go in to cast your vote. You've got to vote for the person that you know you can count on, that you know you can trust. You can't trust Ted Cruz. He's going to say whatever he has to say to serve his own political purpose. But I've worked with Colin. As I said, we were on different sides of the aisle. We were on different sides of some issues. But at the end of the day, I know that he has the interest of the people of Texas first and foremost. And he will be the kind of public servant that people of Texas deserve and that the whole country needs in the United States Senate.
Congressman Allred, I want to look at some numbers here. I was looking at some of the recent polling from the Texas Politics Project. It was last month, and it says 28% of independents, about 15% of Republicans say they just don't know enough about you yet. Do you think that bringing Congresswoman Liz Cheney to Texas helps you reach any of those people who don't know enough?
Well, first and foremost, I'm just honored to have Liz here. I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. And I think that's where our friendship is rooted. And I think that this is an incredibly important election for all the reasons that she mentioned. But also, I want principled conservatives in this state to know that I want them to be a part of this campaign, that they are welcome in our coalition, that I'll be their senator as well, that I'll uphold our values and our commitments to the Constitution. That's why I'm so proud to have Liz here, and that's what I hope that Texans can start to learn.
I know that a few months ago, Senator Cruz launched a campaign that was Democrats for Cruz. He recently has gotten the endorsement of a Democrat, the Harris County District Attorney. So when you see Democrats crossing the aisle like that, does that water down anything that the Congresswoman is doing?
Listen, this is not about whatever Ted Cruz is trying to do to distract from his record of being the most extreme senator really in the country over his 12 years in the Senate. This is about the choice that we have for us going forward. And here in Texas, as Liz said, we have a pretty stark choice. One between a senator who has only been interested in himself, who put himself and his political interests and his party interests over the Constitution in an incredibly dangerous way that nearly succeeded in overturning an American presidential election, and somebody who will put us first. I've been the most bipartisan Texan in Congress. I'm proud of that. I've pursued that proactively. You have to reach out and try and do that, as Liz knows. And that's the way I want to serve in the Senate as well.
I do want to ask you a policy question about the border. Clearly, that's so important here in Texas and all across the country right now. But I'm wondering if you feel like you're sort of in a no man's land, because you have been critical of the Biden and Harris administration. You're sitting next to a Republican. I know you don't necessarily embrace all of the policy ideas regarding border and immigration when it comes to some of the things Republicans say. So where do you stand?
Well, listen, I want us to have a secure border, and we have to have a reform to our immigration system because it's broken. Ted Cruz has had forever to work on this. And every time he's had a chance, he's actually taken down bipartisan efforts to try and secure the border, whether that's earlier this year when we were trying to put $20 billion into border security. And Texans should know this. No state would have benefited more than Texas from that border deal. And Ted Cruz took it down because he thought it'd be better for him in the election if he still had the problem to run on than trying to solve it. As somebody whose family's from Brownsville, Texas, the very tip of Texas here, listen, I know that our inaction leads to those communities having to bear the brunt. And that's why we can't afford to have 6 more years of someone like Ted Cruz who put himself over the state and over our people.
I want both of you to weigh in on this one. This weekend we had another attempted assassination, at least that's what the investigators are calling it, against former President Trump. This morning he blamed rhetoric from President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. He said, quote, "Their rhetoric is causing me to be shot at." Do you worry that you guys are adding to the already divisive environment that we are in, Congresswoman?
I think that there's no question that violence has no place in our politics, and that is not a partisan issue. Violence should have no place in American politics. But I think that what President Trump said this morning has it exactly backwards. When you look at what he did when he lost the last election, when you look at his attempts to seize power, when you look at the fact that he watched, people need to know this, he watched television while police officers were being brutally beaten at the Capitol, while the Capitol was being attacked and invaded, and as his own family pleaded with him to tell the mob to stop the violence that was being carried on in his name. So he is a threat to democracy. There's no question. The answer to that is to defeat him at the ballot box, to defeat him in the election. And I think it's important for people to understand how high the stakes are.
What do you think about the divisive rhetoric?
Yeah. Well, I can't stress enough that violence has no role in our politics or our democracy, and an attack on any candidate is an attack on our democracy. And I also want to say that I'm running on trying to bring us together around our shared values. And one of those shared values is a belief in our Constitution, a belief in the systems that have allowed us to continue perfecting our union over this 250-year experiment that we've been a part of. And that to me is something that we can talk about, that we want to protect and preserve without that crossing over into being anything, saying that anyone deserves some kind of physical violence of any kind. That is totally separate. So what we're trying to do here is preserve what we think are our most important institutions that has made us the greatest country in the world, and that will lead us to continue to be that.
Have either of you had to increase your security over the course of the last days or weeks?
Look, I think that security remains a constant and ongoing concern, and the violence that we're seeing that's become part of our political process is something that we haven't seen in recent history in this country. And I think that it's really important for us to elect people who represent and reflect that we're both a good and a great nation, and who are going to help bring us all together, and who are going to respect the sanctity of our elections, and who are going to make sure that we defend our institutions.
Congressman, have you made any changes?
Well, unfortunately, security has been an ongoing concern, and it's going to continue to be. But what we have to do is make sure that as we are trying to make sure that candidates are safe, and certainly I want to be safe as I'm going around our great state, that we're doing it in a way that still allows folks to know who we are and understand what we're trying to do. Because what people do when they attack our democracy, when they make attacks on candidates, is they can sometimes drive us further away from our elected officials who we should actually be getting closer to, and holding accountable in different ways, or getting to know better, and that we can't ever allow.
Congresswoman Cheney, you have long fought against some of the things that Congressman Allred and Vice President Harris fight for. Do you ever envision a time when you sort of reunite with the Republican Party? What would have to happen for you to feel like they are embracing your ideals now?
Well, I look at it a little bit differently. When I think about my time in Congress, the most fruitful and I think productive exchanges that I had were, with people like Colin, who we could, find each other on the floor and say, wait a minute, you tell me why you think that, and I'll tell you why I think
That's
this,
right.
and let's talk about it, and let's exchange views, and let's learn from each other. And so I think that it's really, really important for us, again, and for voters, as you go to vote, to think about, am I casting my vote for somebody who's going to listen to me, somebody who's going to consider all perspectives and viewpoints, and somebody that I respect, that I trust? And I think that, again, we just need to recognize how important these positions are. And I hope that we can get back to a place where, we're having substantive and fruitful exchanges about policy. That's how you build the best path forward for the country.
I know Vice President Harris has said she would put a Republican in her cabinet if she is elected. Have you had any discussions with her about that?
I have not, and I'm very focused on November 5th and on making sure that we elect good candidates like Colin Allred.
Are you courting any other Republicans? Should we look forward to any other endorsements from Republicans?
Listen, there's a lot of folks who we're going to be bringing out and getting involved in the campaign, and that's important. But I think what Liz just said is really important as well, which is that folks should understand that there are folks in the Congress who are trying to work across the aisle, who are trying to get things done, who are trying to advance causes for the people we represent. And then there are folks like Ted Cruz, who no matter how reasonable the effort is, who no matter how productive the policy discussion could be, will never be a part of it, because that's not what he's there to do. What he's there to do is to drive division and to get himself attention. I'm the exact opposite. As I said, I'm the most bipartisan Texan in Congress, and I want to make sure that folks know that, because that's also a reflection of how I'll serve if I have the honor of doing it in the Senate.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Congresswoman Cheney, Congressman Allred, thank you.
Yeah,
Great
thank
to be
you.
with you. Thank you.